you should start 1 minute earlier. Start counting.
Thank you.
As a good evening, Athens time. As I said in my opening remarks, we owe many things to Canada, primarily because there were many Canadian professors in Ottawa and later in Toronto. We say that on our website that they had this great, crazy idea. They were not Greek Canadians, most of them they were non-Greek Canadians. They had a sort of association that they thought that, apart from writing the expenses, they were more serious than that. I said in my opening that to form the Athens system so people can come and write the expenses, of course, was partially true. The other part is that many people really thought that we can do something good. Now, to celebrate in the 30 years, I thought we before, excluded me, they actually, but now I thought maybe we can return something and we organize a series of events, benefit from many Canadian professors they come here. We were very lucky that Trump made Canada known around the world, including in Athens, Greece. There is an expression in ancient Greek, nothing bad without good, something like that. I know it in ancient Greek, but I don't know how to translate it. So always there is something good in it, that's something bad, a mixture of that. And we have organized, and the end result will be, I tried before, but I failed, many failed, to form a Canadian University Alumni Association. Now, I tried from the top, bottom, now I'm trying from the bottom top, so let's show to the world that we have many Canadians that they are willing to present something, and then I'll go to the all alumni associations in Canadian universities, and I ask them if they have Greeks living in Greece, because I'm receiving from University of Ottawa, for example, I'm part of their list. So that's the only way that I can find, because the Canadian Embassy here, even though they came to our first event, they don't have a list. And there's a Canadian Institute as well, but nobody has a list. Now, I'm very pleased that Professor Good, she accepted our invitation to speak for 30-40 minutes about an issue actually that we had a professor from Turkey that he did his sabbatical last year here. Remember when I said for 1 year about degrowth, a theory that I don't like very much, but I'm open ears and open eyes, and she can change my mind. You will introduce yourself, introduce your topic, 30 to 40 minutes. Thank you for accepting.
Absolutely. Hello, you all. Professor Papanikos, thank you so much for inviting me here. And it's great to be with you all. I now recognize a number of you from just today, so it's great. And I'm happy to be part of this gathering related to put on by the Canadian University Alumni in Greece Association. I did my undergraduate degree in international relations at the University of British Columbia. My master's degree is from York University in environmental studies, just outside of Toronto. Any Canadian university alum here? Okay, from?
I went to Queen's,
Okay.
then Waterloo, and now I teach at the University of Manitoba.
Oh, that's great. Okay, welcome. And,
I went to Waterloo as well.
okay,
QBC too.
nice. And was there another hand next to you?
I went to McMaster.
From McMaster, Hamilton. We're St. Catharines, and so, okay, welcome to the Canadian alum. I did my PhD at Cornell University, so I did a little stint in the United States. And this is my first time in Greece. I've just come from the better part of a week in Idra. Unbelievable. So it's
That's the connection with the poet, the Canadian.
Yeah, Leonard Cohen, absolutely, musician, poet.
That's
Yes.
why you went there.
That's right, exactly. Following Leonard Cohen for sure. I'm very grateful to be here. At Brock University, where I teach, just outside of Toronto, I'm chair and associate professor in the Department of Communication, Popular Culture, and Film. I start classes and meetings almost always with a land acknowledgement. This is a common practice in Canada. A land acknowledgement often highlights the original peoples who, when we're coming together. For Brock University, for example, we acknowledge the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. The land acknowledgement or generally highlights that many of the descendants of the original people, First Nation, Métis, Inuit, continue to live and work on these lands today. Another aspect of land acknowledgement that I often share is asking people to acknowledge the land. This version of a land acknowledgement is one that I'd like to do with all of you now. So what I'd ask us all to do is pause and think of some aspect of the land, the water, for which you are grateful in this moment. Just pause for a moment. Thank you. As the title of my talk suggests, I will be sharing about stories, the economy, and the climate crisis. I will also be exploring why I'm sharing about stories, the economy, and the climate crisis at what is, for me here, a religion and theology conference. I know we have come to the conference from different paths, which is wonderful. For me, this is a religion and theology conference, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you why that comes into my talk. I'll also say that in the brief time that I've been here, I feel like I'm joining a conversation with many of you. Johan, I was part of Johan's talk earlier today on degrowth and rewilding. Kalman Kellerman just recently shared about spiritual business in the Anthropocene. So I'm absolutely sharing this in the spirit of joining in a conversation with all of you in the ways that you relate to what I'm sharing. Let's start with stories, a topic about which I share a lot, and indeed I'll be sharing tomorrow afternoon as well. I would like to propose that there's nothing more powerful than the stories we tell. It can be hard to convey just how fundamentally powerful stories are. Thomas King writes, in The Truth About Stories, a native narrative, quote, "The truth about stories is that's all we are," end quote. Indeed, that's all we are. How you understand who you are, the people in your life, your community, the country where you live, the world, it's all story. Another quote, this time from Harold Johnson's book, The Power of Story. Our vision is shaped by story. Our hearing, our morals, and ethics are all story. The wiring in our brains is shaped by story. Every thought you think is shaped by story. I find the stories that we tell about the Earth especially fascinating. Our current Earth story is a very humanity-focused story, and it is an incredibly recent story in the swath of human history. It is a story of the Earth, all of it, the ground, above, below, under, the water, on the water, everything that is inert, all that stirs, the wind. The story is, it's all resource. The privatization of space research and travel has highlighted that space is also a resource. Or, as we tend to say, it's all natural resources. Earth is a collection of natural resources for human use, consumption, profiteering, has served some of humanity in some ways very well, at least in the short term. A number of us, especially in more affluent parts of the world, and the materially wealthy and less affluent parts of the world, can expect to live unprecedented lifespans, have access to reliable and unprecedented variety and quantity of food, and enjoy unprecedented material comfort. And it is all stories that got us here. There is the terra nullius, nobody's land story, that facilitated explorers and colonists expropriating land, all kinds of racist stories about indigenous people whose land was taken. And there is the incredibly powerful, devastatingly powerful story of the earth, all of it that is a collection of raw materials, resources awaiting our use, no more, no less. The industrial revolutions were manufacturing revolutions, commencing in the mid-18th century, transitioning human power and human-scaled agriculture and manufacturing to steam, coal, eventually electronics, now AI, mega production. Machines could process faster and with much less human labor and input. New stories were therefore needed. There was a vitally important news story that had to be learned about consumption. If a mechanized, stuff-producing society was going to take over, the stories would have to celebrate buying lots of stuff. We would also need to embrace the story of human work becoming machine work. As John Kenneth Galbraith offers, quote, "The modern corporation must manufacture not only goods, but a desire for the goods it manufactures," end quote. And the stories worked. Collectively, around the globe, with varying rapidity, we learned to consume voraciously. Not only to consume, but to also get rid of stuff and consume anew. A vital story element. Vance Packard, writing in The Wastemakers, calls this, quote, "the replacement revolution," or stories, quote, telling people to get rid of the products they already own by encouraging people to throw things away. Industrial revolutions are interesting for another reason. They can be seen as co-occurring with the commencement and rooting of the story of economic growth. In Stephen Deller's Brief History of Economic Growth Theory, the role of product specialization is highlighted. Deller starts with subsistence farming with no trade. The story of economic growth then becomes increasingly important as product specialization, initially in the context of farming, and productivity / output increase. As agricultural processes streamline and there are quote unquote economies of scale, personally I think it's a complicated concept, but that's a tangent for another time. There were economies of scale, and agricultural labor moved from rural areas to growing urban areas where there was increasing need for manufacturing labor. Manufactured product surplus was added to agricultural surplus, and initially as productivity surplus fostered trade and specialization, there was an equalizing effect. The middle class was growing. The logic and story of economic growth was really taking root. Okay, so let's stop here for a moment. what I'm struck by when thinking about industrial revolutions and about economic growth is that somewhere they make for a great, very logical story or stories. In other words, there is a version of these stories that could work. Indeed, there are versions of these stories that could work wonderfully, even in the long term. They would be stories that are not dissimilar to our current stories. The economy must grow so that more and more people can be gainfully and satisfyingly employed as they make increasing quantities of stuff. People would buy the stuff. They would be happy. This story says only a growing economy can allow for happy people leading better lives as they consume more and more stuff. But here's the challenge. The endless growth story would have to be on a different planet. The Earth, the planet that you imagine, the one that could facilitate the endlessly increasing consumption and discarding, would need to be a planet in a sci-fi story, a planet perhaps in a far-flung solar system. But that one, the story of endlessly growing consumption and throwing away, cannot happen on this finite, interconnected Earth. As economist Tim Jackson writes in Prosperity Without Growth, Economics for a Finite Planet, quote, "Those who hope that economic growth will lead to a materialistic utopia are destined for disappointment. We simply don't have the ecological capacity to fulfill this dream." That said, the Industrial Revolution is an economic growth story that fostered an increasing consumption frenzy over the past few hundred years has meant objective improvements over time in many quality of life indices for many people. Since the mid-1700s, people, and particularly in more materially affluent parts of the world, live longer, as this highlights, have more food security, and much more recently enjoy greater gender, and in many parts of the world, race and sexuality, equity, worker rights protections, and many in the broadly defined quote-unquote middle class and above enjoy unprecedented privilege. Indeed, here we all are. We've arrived here for our religion, theology, philosophy, psychology conference. We have arrived here, a lot of us by plane. We've made our way to this beautiful part of the world. We are staying and enjoying climate-controlled spaces. We have readily available tasty food. Lunch was delicious, by the way.
The cookies were great, Gregory.
And the cookies were great.
The cookies, thank you.
Yeah. But the Industrial Revolution stories that do indeed continue to this day, and the intertwined market growth economy story are not about some faraway planet. These are stories told and embraced right here on Earth. As such, in addition to the human benefit indices that I just highlighted, the Industrial Revolutions, an economic based on growth, set in motion profound, fundamental devastation of the planet and all life with whom we share the planet. From ecosystem destruction to the related sixth mass extinction, species extinction, to climate change, or more accurately, the climate crisis, our consumption story and the endless growth story are to blame. There are some positives when it comes to climate crisis stories. For example, it used to be that when I wrote about the climate crisis and climate crisis communication, and I've been writing, researching about climate change communication for over 30 years, I had to talk about, and write about competing stories. There was the story that the vast number of climate researchers offered about human activity, anthropogenic activity, exacerbating the greenhouse effect and causing the climate to become warmer. But I also felt, in the past, compelled to talk about the competing story that often appeared, the story challenging anthropogenic climate change. I also shared the climate change denial story. Thankfully, the reality of fossil fuel burning induced climate change is no longer in any substantive way as frequently challenged, is no longer in any substantive way or as frequently challenged. And it used to be that climate change stories often did not include extreme weather implications, fires, droughts, floods, hurricanes in this climate change story frame. News stories were not linking the climate crisis to extreme weather. This is a piece I wrote a few years ago in the Toronto Star, shout out to Canadian media, the Toronto Star, about this lack of extreme weather in the climate change frame. But this has also changed. Climate change stories are widely told and extreme weather effects are often included in those stories. And this storytelling change is good. So, while I could now regale you with climate crisis statistics, unprecedented carbon dioxide concentrations, unprecedented heat, unprecedented glacier and snowpack loss, unprecedented coral bleaching, unprecedented extreme weather, fire, hurricanes, tornadoes. My guess is that you are encountering these stories, that these stories are being told is critical. But while telling climate crisis stories is critical, stories that are not told are equally important. So the current climate crisis story challenge, I would say the meta challenge, but meta, kind of complicated these days, so I'll say the current challenge, the huge challenge, is telling the story that the foundations of the climate crisis are economic. The climate crisis is built on human consumption and capitalism's market growth economy. That story is almost never told. George Lakoff, in the context of framing theory, calls this hypocognition. Cultivation theorists, it's a nice ringtone. George Lakoff, in the context of framing theory, calls this hypocognition. Cultivation theorists call it symbolic annihilation. The research clearly shows, not surprisingly, that people cannot know what they are not told, especially when it comes to that with which we do not experience for ourselves. We rely on stories. Collectively, we have had to rely on being told that the burning of fossil fuels is changing the planet's climate. We have also needed to be told that as the planet changes, there will be dire consequences. We also need to be told about the role of the economy. Don't get me wrong. The economy is regularly discussed. Market updates are offered all the time. Indeed, market updates offer very regular and very succinct reminders that there is one economic story with a very straightforward storyline. When stock market valuations are up, that's good. When stock market valuations are down, that's bad. Big market drops are very bad, as are stock market valuations that continue to go down over multiple days. The relationship between consumption that the stock market represents, and the stock market is really all about consumption, and the climate crisis That story, the one that links those two, the stock market and the climate crisis, that is almost never told. My colleague and friend, Rick Cool, at Royal Roads University on the west coast of Canada, in Victoria, shout out to Canada, had an idea. What if every time there is a market report, there's also an update of the CO2 readings at Mauna Loa? So Mauna Loa is the location in Hawaii where CO2 excuse me, parts per million readings have been taken daily since 1958. So Rick proposed that the stock market and CO2 readings could be shared together. First there would be the stock market, and then CO2 measurement from Mauna Loa. He even lobbied the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, shout out to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, to implement this, but to no avail. The story of the stock market, it seems, should be told very, very regularly. The story of carbon dioxide concentrations, not so much. By the way, here are the historic and daily readings from Mauna Loa. The reading of 422.8 parts per million in 2024 was a record high. As you can see, we're above that today. I meant to get it. It goes to, well, you can't even really see it. It goes to May. Can you see what May? Anyway, it would take, I shared it, I got this a couple days ago. Think about it. Do you have stories that combine capitalism's market growth and the climate crisis? I don't mean examples like recycling stories or green consumption stories. I mean stories that highlight that when we consume more of whatever it is that we're consuming, everything, electric cars, renewable energy, carbon increases. If you cannot think of an example, take a moment to think about what such stories would even look like. Or if that proves difficult, maybe just focus on stories that challenge the market growth economy. Do you ever encounter such stories? Are stories exploring alternatives to the capitalist market economy ever shared? One other story question. Do you ever encounter stories of how unhappy consumerism and materialism make us? There's a wealth of research on the topic. I don't go off on this too much, but there's a great book, Tim Kasser's book, The High Price of Materialism. It's a few years old, but it offers an overview of academic research, including experimental design studies and so on, highlighting just how unhappy materialism. And materialism is consumerism, is all about consumption. Materialism is believing that that consumption says something about who we are. Economic degrowth, as the name suggests, does offer a counter to economic growth story, variously defined as, quote, multiscalar transformations beyond the growth-oriented economic paradigm to achieve long-term socio-ecological sustainability, as Rossman and Isler. Quote, the planned and democratic reduction of production and consumption as a solution to the social ecological crises, Fitzpatrick, Parikh, and Cosme, and succinctly, quote, a solution to achieve sustainability at all levels. That's Cosme, Santos, and O'Neill. Fitzpatrick et al. Cites Fash when offering the following, quote, degrowth speaks to the primary contradictions of our time. Ecological overshoot, social shortfall, capital accumulation. Currently proposed solutions to addressing these issues are diverse, but often remain packaged within the dominant narrative of correcting market failures, as opposed to dismantling systemic failures. Often remain packaged within the dominant narrative of correcting market failures, as opposed to dismantling systemic failures. Indeed. So what might it look like to dismantle systemic failures and to repackage outside the dominant narrative. In other words, what might a movement away from economic growth and towards degrowth look like? So this brings me to religion, theology, and stories of spirituality. Since I was a child, I get choked up. All right. Since I was a child, I have been drawn to the earth as a sacred place. Indeed, as a young person, a sleepaway camp, 5 or so hour drive from north of Toronto, I found it impossible to make sense of the clear cutting of forests near to the camp. It was also at a camp in northern Ontario that I was introduced to Indigenous spirituality. It is the Teme, Agama, Anishinaabe, and the Temagami First Nation Indigenous people who live in that part of Canada. I learned about the Great Spirit in all life, all water, all land. I learned that the earth is sacred, that there is a Great Spirit in all life, everywhere, that offering thanks to the earth is a vital practice. This had huge resonance for me then and has continued to have great meaning for me until this day. I would like to pause here for a moment. And I'd like us all to be conscious of a few things, if you're so willing. Feel yourself sitting in your chair, your feet on the floor. If you're willing, close your eyes, no pressure. Imagine your feet connected through the floor into the ground below. Taking root, perhaps. Take in a few deep breaths. Slowly. In and out. Perhaps picture trees. Receiving rain. Trees offering oxygen. You breathing in that oxygen. Now offer a thank you to the ground, to the water, the trees. Open your eyes. Thank you. In 2023, the Pew Research Center surveyed people living in the United States and found that 83% believe that people have a soul or a spirit. 81% say there is something spiritual that exists. 74% say there are some things that science cannot possibly explain. Just over half of the respondents, 57%, believe that animals other than humans can have their own spirits or spiritual energies, with just less than half, 48%, saying that, quote, parts of the natural landscape, such as mountains, rivers, or trees, can have spirits or spiritual energies, end quote. Now I will offer the following. I believe this story. And I believe that it is this story, that the earth is a sacred place with which we are absolutely and fundamentally interconnected, that offers perhaps the story for, quote, dismantling humanity's systemic failures. John Muir wrote, in My First Summer in the Sierra, quote, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe, end quote. It is this story that offers us a path towards degrowth. In her beautiful book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer offers that we were once all indigenous. We are not currently indigenous, currently indigenous, by any means. I am not indigenous. My ancestors arrived as settlers to the United States a few generations ago. But all of us come from people of varying number of generations in the past who lived fundamentally with the earth. Our ancestors knew they were interconnected with the earth. Our ancestors lived with gratitude for what the earth so generously offers. What degrowth proposes may seem radical, even wacky. But think about it. We've managed to engage in a largely believe the current nihilistic economic growth story. The story that the earth exists as a storehouse of natural resources for our ever more ravenous consumption. That really is kind of a wacky story. Or, as economist Kenneth Boulding proposes, anyone who believes exponential growth can go on forever is either a madman or an economist. The Pew Research highlights what many of us know and experience ourselves. The earth is a sacred place. So yes, I believe there is great hope that we can collectively embrace a fundamentally different story. What does the practicality of that implementation of degrowth look like? Fitzpatrick et al. Analyzed over 1,100 degrowth texts, articles, books, book chapters, and found 446 with specific policy proposals. Based on this analysis, they offer the following as the most frequently cited degrowth policy instruments within the degrowth literature. Universal basic incomes, work time reductions, job guarantees with a living wage, maximum income caps, declining caps on resource use and emissions, not-for-profit cooperatives, holding deliberative forums, reclaiming the commons, establishing eco-villages, and housing cooperatives. I am not an economist. Indeed, when I was first approached about offering some thoughts, I shared an email back, a response email to say, well, I'm very interested in the economy, I care a lot about it, but I'm not an economist. You are an economist, and there are other economists I know in there.
So you are the other part. You said either you're an economist or a madman. I'm an economist. I'm taking you back. So if the choice is between the two, I'm an economist.
Yeah. Yes, so I'm here as a communication scholar who researches and talks a lot, writes a lot about the power of story. And I believe that the path to these degrowth policy, that path begins with story. The most powerful, most revolutionary of which is perhaps the story of a spiritual and interconnected earth. And as a side note, for us Canadians, as our economy is upturned and our repackaging is forced upon us, both because of the current US administration and because of other realities such as AI, machine learning, etc. The silver lining is an opportunity to claim a different economic story. The opportunity is for us to redefine what it means to be a healthy economy based on measures related to quality of life and happiness. And over lunch today, some of us talked about some of those indices, the gross happiness index and genuine progress indicator and so on. Growth must cease to be the economy's only story.
Then you have 4 minutes.
Absolutely. I'll be done
Because
in,
you consume too much time.
I'm gonna be done in 2. Bill McKibben writes, quote, most cultures historically have put something else, God or nature or some combination at the center, but we've put them at the periphery. A consumer society doesn't need them to function, and it can't tolerate the limits they might impose. There's only need for people. A final vital story element I would like to propose. When we remind ourselves of our interconnection with the sacred earth, When we breathe in, like you all did a few moments ago, and we are reminded that we are breathing in the trees, the plants, the water, that our bodies are the earth, and we know that that is true and good, we then offer thanks. It turns out that gratitude and rabid consumption, gratitude and materialism are antithetical. When we have a habit of offering thanks for that which has come from the earth, when we offer thanks that we are of the earth, a new essential story is being told and the old story cannot continue. As Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh offers, quote, looking deeply, we see that humans are made only of non-human elements, including plants, animals, and minerals. There is a mountain in us. Do you see? There are clouds in us. Do you see?
Thank you. Okay, I'll take over there. And now it's time for questions, comments, whatever you want to say. Oh, you're still alive. Surprising. First come, first serve. That's a good rule.
Okay, so
Do we have, somewhere we have the microphone. Where are my sleeves? The sleeves in Greece, they've been unionized. So we need
This is
that.
more realistic recreation
we
than I
need
realized.
slaves
We're
here.
bringing in the slaves.
Actually, to qualify what I'm saying, in ancient Greece, you know, slaves, the word is doulos. Doulos means work. So only those that they work, they were not free microphone. We need a microphone maybe. Yeah.
We don't
No,
need it. We
we-
don't need it. I mean,
We have a,
yes.
okay, we have a big brother. Okay.
All right. So you mentioned that you no longer find.
Did I thank you? Thank you very much for your. I thought I would go here and say it. I had it in my mind, but you took me to my village, a nice place there, and it's still underdeveloped. Thank you very much for an excellent
Yeah.
presentation
Oh, thank you.
and well prepared presentation. That's the most important thing.
Okay, so you mentioned that you no longer encounter an opposition to the anthropogenic climate change story, but the country just to the south of yours is currently run by people who do not accept that consensus, nor do they accept the consensus on a great many other topics in both natural and social science, and often it's not that they reject it in favor of some maverick alternative theory, but more that they're sort of aggressively anti-theory in some sense, and there's no consistent story. So what does a storyteller do to address the situation of people who aren't really committed to any consistent story, but just change the story up depending on whatever it is that they want to do?
Okay, can I take 4 people and then you respond to all of
Oh,
them?
absolutely.
So at least we guarantee that everybody has been here. I think you are second. Not you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your
You.
thank you, ma'am, for your very
Can you identify yourself so we know that where are you from? Sorry, I forgot to ask you, but
I'm Roger Kwong, Auburn University.
okay.
I'm C.V. Babu from New Delhi, Delhi University, Department of Philosophy. So thank you, ma'am, for your thought-provoking story about stories. And you were saying that there are many stories like business stories, economic stories, or industrial revolutionary stories, climate stories, stock market stories. But when we say that the cookies were great, it doesn't really sound like a story.
When what is great? I'm sorry.
The cookies were great
Oh.
when we said.
I see.
It does not really sound like a story fabricated. Rather, it is a lived experience. And this lived experience has a non-story element of striving. So, does that non-story striving elements, fabricating stories in order to get it fulfilled. At least in case of certain vicious stories, if not in a counter stories.
Okay, we're gonna get it.
Okay.
Okay, you have said that we have another fourth one, then you will respond.
Are you going to be able to do
I'm not sure.
that? I'm Malcolm Murray from Canada. Not all Canadians necessarily agree. This, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. This may not entirely work, but I hope it'll capture the idea. So if we all believe that God punished us for being immoral, we will more likely be moral. And I think everybody can agree on that. But the difficulty is, how do I convince myself to really believe there's a God, and certainly against the evidence? And two, why isn't there an alternative way of, like, does this mean if I don't believe in God, I cannot be moral? Which I presume you would say, no, I don't know what you would say. But I would say, of course I could be moral without believing in God.
Yeah.
And so obviously the analogy is to, do I really need to believe the world is sacred and without, and yet not be, and sort of tone down the consumer. Here's a shout out to Aristotle. He too recognized being happiness is nothing to do with consumerism is a maturity.
Right.
And the last one for the time being.
Yes, Søren Gosvik, University of Copenhagen, Denmark. First of all, thank you for a brilliant talk. It's always nice to listen to native speakers of our common English. I will try and do my best to ask my question. At the end, we saw the 10 Commandments of Fitzgerald and company, and I think we all agree, and I even think that everybody knows that this is what should be done. So the big question to me is, why do things go on and on as they are? Why don't people do anything? I'm not into natural sciences, I'm a philosopher, so I can't judge whether the 95% who say that climate changes are caused by human beings are right, or the 5% or even lesser that do not agree are right. But I can't see a reason why there's such a vast majority of people who believe that climate changes are caused by humans, because then you can do something about it. So why do they believe that? I mean, common people, not natural scientists, but we common people. Why do we believe that? Because we want to believe it. That's exactly what Nietzsche told us. Human beings believe and think what they want to think. They do not want to see reality as it is. So we all agree we should be more moral, we should be more spiritual, as you recognize. But why don't we become so? I think that's a matter for privileged people like us. We can be moral, we can be spiritual. But in my country too, everybody wants to be that. But why then is it so that last year we had the largest number ever of people going abroad by planes, tourists, going abroad, if you will, for nothing. But at the same time, people are very moralistic, very spiritual, etc., etc. So that leads back from Nietzsche to Hegel, who said, it doesn't matter what you say about how the world should be, as long as it doesn't become so. So as long as the world doesn't change, everything you say about how the world should be will remain a private matter. And philosophy is not about private matters. It is about how things really are. So that's my
Okay. More people want it, but she's gonna forget, and maybe we're not gonna have time. So that's the reason.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's true that it seems much more, to honor this gathering much more if we now had just a general roundtable discussion. I mean, hearing you talk, I'm like, I just want to hear you continue to share what you were sharing. Yeah, I mean, and I don't have the philosophy, like I can't now say, well, but Hegel also said this, because I don't have that. Look, I guess I'll offer that I do think, whatever is my bias. My bias is that I think there's a certain kind of truth that comes to people, like that there's a kind of truth about the earth that comes to people when they spend time, when they have the opportunity to spend time, like in the, you know, in the earth, and that, like, look, it's a wicked, we have all kinds of wicked problems, right? So this is what you're talking about enters into that. I mean, one thought that came to mind, it's not a perfect, like, I worked as an environmental activist for a number of years, and I remember once we were, a group of the activists were challenged because we had driven to like a protest sort of, and people were like, "Why did you drive? Why didn't you take your bikes to the, you know, to the protest?" And we were like, "There's no infrastructure for us to ride our bikes to get to this, to get to where we need to be." And that's kind of stuck with me that now how we get to where we're part of making the infrastructure happen like that, I don't know, but I think that it's maybe not quite fair to say, look, people, you know, fly all the time, therefore they don't really care about climate change, or what, you know, whatever version of that might be. I think that I think people yeah. So anyway, I'll just that was.
We have 3 more speakers.
Yeah, I know, and I'll just say that. Well, I wrote down about, like the current situation with the U.S. government. I know I brought it up because I couldn't help, but I just.
Now we're gonna bring up the Denmark issue. That's the 52nd state.
Right, yeah, yeah, exactly.
What, you have to watch what you're saying.
I mean, honestly, again, like, look, I'll just say, so I just went to a conference in Canada in Banff, and it was an outdoor education conference. So it was kindergarten through grade 8 teachers who went to this conference. The conference sold out. There were 550 educators who showed up. That there were 800 people on a waiting list to go to this conference. There's like this voracious appetite amongst educators to talk about, get the tools to bring young people into the outdoors. So sometimes when I hear about, like when you're asking about, maybe it's naive, but I kind of feel like, yes, the US, and yes, it's fraught, and yes, and then part of me is like, bring the kids outside. Like, let's start with them and giving them the opportunity to know what's true. The cookies are great. Like I wrote down the cookies are great.
That was a comment for me though. I think he said it
Yeah,
for me.
but I know, but weren't you saying, like, isn't that also a story? The cookies are great. Like,
These are lived experiences.
they what? Say it again.
Lived
Yeah,
experience.
well, I mean, so, yeah, and part of what I'll say about that is, and I don't want to take away from lived experiences, but I think that lived experiences are also intertwined with story, right? Yeah, it's not very sad, but, that's what came to mind.
There are 2 more people who want to ask, so if you...
Okay, yeah, look, the other thing I'll say is, and we're running out of time more
No,
generally.
but you can respond to this back. He said something, I think. Did you?
Was it a why don't we do it? No. Yeah, was yours the Fitzpatrick, why don't we?
No, just if we become all spiritual, wouldn't that be great? And then we'd help the earth. And that's true,
Yes,
but somewhat
right.
uninteresting because
Right.
it seems to be obviously true, but not. Okay, so
Not necessarily, like.
not necessarily true, and two, how do you now get to people to convince, first off, it's easy to convince people that we're in disaster here, and first I have to now become spiritual. I experience the trees and all that stuff you talk about,
Yeah.
yes, but I don't experience the intentionality in that, so usually I thank retentional agent, so where am I gonna get to?
Yeah.
We still have a few. You want to ask a question?
Yeah.
Where are you from? Yeah, we will talk during the walk because I see it's a very deep discussion.
I'm from India, Delhi University. I'm a research scholar. I'm saying that you are saying the stock markets. Stock market, the stock market here is depend on the share is going up and down. It is you are saying that this is bad and this is good. This is bad in your perspective, but the bad and good is depend on the market what it works. The company what is better. They share buy and sell is depend on the how the company is growing up and down. So you are saying this is bad and this is good.
Right.
It's depend on how it works.
Yeah. You're saying it's more complicated.
Yeah, more
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah. I mean, mostly I would say yes, it's all more complicated. I mean, I do think, look, part of what I'm just fundamentally struck by is that in all kinds of other contexts of storytelling, I mean, and the screens have been my primary interest through, through a lot of my research and writing. And
Actually, I thought you said, let's say, Global Mail or Toronto or newspapers, they report daily the fluctuations of the stock market, but they don't report the fluctuation. That's what.
yeah, they report it, yeah,
That's what I think you
CBC.
want to point out. That one gets a lot of attention, the
Yeah.
story. The other story does not get attention.
It just doesn't get any attention, including that there's no other even, by and large, people, maybe you can tell me examples for it, but by and large, there's just no, in all other storytelling, media storytelling, there's almost always some kind of point counterpoint, or some kind of, right? That's been sort of the simplistic, like, unbiased reporting. There's been some kind of, like, whatever, that isn't necessarily so great either, but I guess I'm highlighting that, isn't it interesting that that's a particular story that we tell about the economy in the stock market? There's almost never any counter to it. Almost no. And so I hear what you're saying. Look, if it's some company on the stock market that makes.
Even take Elon Musk company, it's going down because European people don't buy Elon Musk.
No, dialogues are not allowed.
That's the company is going down. Because of that, the performance they're going to attain really.
Okay, we can, because I want.
Okay, so.
You want to, you have this internal urgency to ask this question no matter what. I want to consume our time.
So is this
Make a quick
yes.
statement.
Eulabeia? I think it's a Greek word.
Well, Amelia,
Eulabeia.
say it in English, it's better.
Paying careful attention. I think it's a Greek word that is
Epideleia.
related to.
I don't understand Greek words when
Okay, what is
non-Greeks
not
are pronounced. But
yeah.
if you say it in English, maybe I'll be able to translate it from Greek.
I think the translation is something like paying careful attention, and it's related to sacredness. And I was thinking while you were talking, thank you very much for your communication, about that word. I had that word on my mind because probably one of the fears that we need to recover is that like to paying attention
Take the word down. So
not only to communications but also to our relation with others, being them human or non-human.
Yeah.
So that would be like.
I like that. I think that's lovely, and I think it's really.
Exchange emails.
We will exchange. Yes, we'll exchange emails. Right.
Hey, pollute. Epimelia, yeah. You see, it's not epimelia.
I don't think so.
Taking care.
No, it's
Taking care.
Evdemea.
Eh?
Evdemonia.
No.
Evdemonia,
No,
it's happiness.
Evdemonia.
Happiness.
Right. Can I just say
But
that?
that's an English word, evdemonia.
No.
Whatever you want.
Evdemonia.
You must have tried the Greek language. Yeah, let me stop here. And stop with a story because it relates to when I went to Canada. I have to make it fast. Gregory means fast, by the way. So, which is not always good. Some people told me when I was young. And in 1979-80, it was in Ottawa, was the winter. I like winter, by the way. And I went down, because the University of Ottawa is very close to the center, and I went downtown about 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock in the winter time, it's dead. So I was just for a beer, and then someone, a winer came, young guy, and said, can you spare a dime for me? And I said something smart, I don't remember what I said, that's not important. But he said, in response, said, were you so smart when you first came here? It's a very important, shattered me the story. And I said, no, I knew what he wanted to say. So I said, no, I was born very, I had a friend next to me. She was amazed, she looked at me and said, no, I was born here. I had only 6 months in her. I said, what do you mean you were born here? Okay, your parents. No, my parents were born here. Your grandparents. My grandparents were born here. You know, you bastard, I said, I'm First Nation, indigenous person. And you came here and you slaughtered my people. You know what he said? I mean, he looked at me and he said, I apologize, my friend, for what my people did to your people. For me, it was amazing. Even though he didn't understand that my accent was not indigenous, it was a great accent, but he wanted to blackmail me that I was a foreigner. Yet he became a foreigner. He changed his attitude. It was amazing. And that's Canada, I think. He apologized for all, when you bear no responsibility for whatever his grandparents did. But for me, it was the first impression that I got from Canada. It's different from the United States, and I chose it by choice. It wasn't an accident. I wanted to go to Canada because it had very good policies. We knew that because Andreas Papandreou in 1980 became the prime minister and brought a lot of these policies to make a welfare state of these things. So Canadian was very important in Greek politics when I was a student, and I wanted to study. And there were very few people that I went to Canada that did a PhD for Canada. It's very difficult. Most of the Greeks that they go about Greece. So it was very challenging for me to do that. Okay, we will continue with this Canadian, honoring our ancestors as an idea, and we'll have a series of events. Thank you for being here. Those that go to the Aristotle's Lyceum, you can go. I'm not coming with you, but we have two philosophers that, and Konstantinos, the other slave that we have here, both of them are called Konstantinos, and they can do their work. And tonight we have the Greek night. Those that they have both the Greek night, they make arrangements. Those that don't go to the Aristotle's Lyceum,
We're gonna
the others,
meet
we
here.
have two Konstantinos. Konstantinos say we'll wait here. Konstantinos, we will go with him. Thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow.